I found a body in the woods. I shouldn't have brought it home. It was the last day of fall. The very last brown leaves rattling on the oaks lining the back hill. I'd been out fixing a spot where the fire rot had started to fall away. The property is 60 acres, most of it wild and crowded with ticks and poison oak. Even though I've lived here 20 years, there are places I've never walked. When I bought the land, I heard there was a spring somewhere up the mountain, where the deer gather, but I've never seen it. As you might guess, I lived way the hell out of town, past the point where even the main roads turn to gravel, and then to dirt. Never once have I seen another person here, unless I invited them, and I didn't hand out too many invitations. I was just finishing up work when I spotted something strange in the nearby brush, a flash of orange. At first, I thought it might be a fallen leaf, still holding onto its last bits of color, but as I looked closer, I saw it was bigger, a hunting vest. I called out, hello? And got no response. I cursed and spat, wishing I'd brought my shotgun. It wouldn't have been impossible for some lost hiker on the PST to end up here, or some drifter wandering for miles out of town. I called out again, and was met with silence. The cold wind rattled the leaves. I could tell snow was on the way. I could have left it there, of course, but it was my land after all. Slowly I approached the orange thing. Then, as I reached it, I almost gauged it. What I found was a body, fully intact except for the head, which was missing. There was no pool of blood, so stupidly I bent closer and saw something that made me gag. Where there should have been a bloody stump, I instead found smooth skin covering the entirety of the severed neck. It was as if the body had been born headless with clean, unscarred skin covered the top of the neck where the head would normally go. The first snowflakes of winter began to fall against my back as I tried to figure out what to make of this impossible corpse. I had no way of knowing how long it had been there. It seemed fresh, maybe due to the cold weather. The hands were cool to the touch, pale and drained of blood, but they didn't show any signs of rot. Oddly so, when I rolled up the sleeve, the skin looked slightly darker than the hand, almost like they belonged to two different people. I turned the body slightly to look at the other arm. It was yet another color, none of it matching. I told myself maybe it was a wear done. Maybe he'd been wearing gloves at some point or a one-sleeved shirt. Maybe he'd had some kind of illness. I could have left the body there, but that would likely mean leaving it for the duration of the winter 3 or 4 months under 5 feet of snow. And who knows what condition it would be in when the time was over. I probably should have called the country sheriff, but there were a few plants on my land that I didn't want him to see, not to mention some code violations. Finally, I decided that I'd be best of bringing this thing back to the house and disposing of it later. Probably dumping it in a park or somewhere so that it could be discovered by somebody else. With some effort, I hauled the body over to a cart I'd hooked onto my 40-wheeler. Then I hauled us back to the main house before the snow started to stick. I had an uninsulated basement attached to the house, only accessible by a single staircase through the kitchen. It mostly kept the pests out and was good for storing some tools and a few dry goods. I dredged the body into there for the night, where it could stay cool but would be protected from the elements, not to mention the bears. Then I washed it up and heated up a can of red beans on my cook stove before settling in to watch the news. The sixth thought occurred to me that this way my first time having company in a few years. Maybe an hour passed and I got to drinking. Then, as I was heading to the kitchen for another beer, I heard something. A little thump, followed by a kind of dredging sound. Of course, being out in the woods, animals were jumping on the roof all the time, but this sound had come from below, and if I'm being honest, seeing the body had set me a little on edge, even if I didn't want to admit it. I picked up my shotgun and walking slowly to the basement door, trying not to make a sound. I was trying to breathe slow, like in those yoga videos they advertise on the Home Shopping Network. Peering down the stairs, I could barely see the body's 2 feet near the bottom of the stairs, except they could have sworn I left the body clear down at the other side of the room. Hello? I called down into the darkness. Hello? There was no response, of course, so I shut the door and started back toward the living room. Outside, the snow was falling harder now, peeling up on the dirt road. But by morning, I'd be here for the duration, on my own until the march served. The sun began to slip over the far mountains, throwing a shadow over everything almost like night. Before I could sit back down again, I heard another sound, and then another. I walked back to the door, but something in me refused to open it this time. Instead, I locked it. As I did, I heard a few more sounds, each one growing closer, and then the handle began to rattle. I took a step back, and then another as the rattling began to grow more urgent. Go away! I shouted. Get! But whatever it was didn't listen. Loud kicks began to sound from the bottom of the door where the wood was beginning to buckle and splinter. I leveled my gun at the door and fired. Then I heard several thumps as something fell down the stairs. For a moment, I just stood there. I definitely wasn't doing any yoga breathing now. My heart was going so fast that I sent a tingle down my left arm. For a moment, everything was silent. My ears rang from the shotgun blast and the air reeked of gunpowder. Then I began to hear the thumps again. First one, then another as the thing made its way back up the stairs. Part of me wanted to shoot it again, to stand my ground, to defend my castle, but then I saw better of the idea. If one shotgun blast through the door didn't finish the scene, I figured a second shot wasn't going to do much better. So for the first time in my life, I ran. I sprinted to the four-wheeler and unhitched the car. As I did, I looked up into the house where I saw the thing standing there. As I watched it, it walked across the living room and sat down in the chair I'd occupied just a few minutes earlier. If it had eyes, I suppose it would have watched TV. I drove through the storm. There were few heavy moments, but for the most part I didn't hit much trouble. The whole time so I couldn't stop looking over my shoulder, as if the thing were sprinting after me, running blindly through the snow like it would catch me any second. Finally, when I hit the main road, I felt like I could breathe again. I didn't stop driving until I was all the way downtown. I'm not sure why, but the first thing I did was to walk into the most crowded bar I could find and order a beer. It's funny, it had been maybe 6 months since the last time I talked to anyone, but suddenly it was all I wanted to do. And for the next few hours, I flapped my gums at anyone who would listen, telling every story, and I knew everyone except the one I'm telling you now. I never did go back to the property. I sold it to some rich man from California. I heard he demolished my old cabin, but in some kind of metal and glass fortress. Maybe that'll keep him safe. As for me, I don't ever plan on living out there again, especially after what happened to my neighbor Kevin. See, a few nights after I left, the sheriff got a frantic call from Kevin's wife who had been out of town. She just got it back to her house during a break in the weather. When she did, she found her husband's body, except it was missing a head. According to the coroner, it had been ripped out of its body. Of course, they said it was a bear, but what kind of bear just takes a head and leaves the rest of the kill untouched, uneaten? I've got no idea what this thing wanted with a severed head. Maybe it was just jealous. Maybe it wanted to wear it like a hat. And then I remember the way the skin tones didn't match on the arms and hands. I wonder, maybe if this thing started as nothing at all, if it slowly put itself together out of all the lonely old men in the woods, all the guys like me that thought we didn't need anyone. At night, I imagine a lot of things. I imagine my own neck ripping at the seams, and then I have to force myself out of bed. I sprint out into the street, running and running until I see another human being, desperate to talk to anyone, willing to do anything for a little company. Thanks you for watching. Subscribe to the channel. Place your thumbnail. I'm really thankful for you guys. You can find the original in the description. Thank you for the watching. Have a good time.